BYU Sports Nation today. Our first guest is Jake Trotter, an ESPN staff writer, writes for the Big 12 blog on ESPN.com. Jake, welcome to BYU Sports Nation.
Good to be here. It's hard to remember some of those. There's been so many BYU wins over Texas lately. I can't even separate them in my mind.
Yeah, and the way that they did them, I mean, ridiculous stuff. Okay, you've been right in the heart of the Big 12 and Texas and going through those demoralizing losses to BYU for the Longhorns. You stoked up the fire within the BYU Sports Nation fan base yesterday with an article you wrote about the Big 12 and saying that expansion is not just a possibility, it's an inevitability. Why do you feel that way?
Well, a couple of reasons. One of the most powerful figures in the league, David Boren, the president at Oklahoma, the school that probably has the most leverage in the Big 12 in terms of pushing expansion. He wants to expand. He came out and said that last week after their Regents meeting. Now, maybe it doesn't happen today or even a year from now, but I think Boren has it in his mind that the Big 12 has got to get back to 12 teams to stay viable before these granting of right contracts come up in 2025, in which case you're going to see the Big Ten and SEC, maybe even the Pac-12, get aggressive about expanding once again. The Big 12 has got to position itself to be stronger and less vulnerable than it is right now. And that kind of gets into my second point is, as soon as somebody else gets picked off, or an Oklahoma or Texas, that's it for the Big 12. So it's in the collective interest of everybody in the league to solidify this conference so that doesn't happen. And because it's happened a couple of times before and it's put the Big 12 on life support, I don't think the league could suffer another one of its members going to another league.
Now, if the Big 12 does decide to expand, Jake, when do you realistically see that happening?
I'd just be speculating if I gave you, a specific year. I don't think it's happening soon. I don't think this is something we're looking at as imminent in the next couple of years. I do think that the Big 12 wants to give this 10-team format a little bit more of a sample size to review. But I think that 3, 4, 5 years from now, I think that's when you could really see the momentum for expansion begin to get to a point where the league takes action. I think they're going to start to discuss it. Boren is going to force that issue, but in terms of action, I still think we're a couple of years away from the Big 12 really getting serious about bringing in a couple of other schools.
How much time do you think the Big 12 has before they really start, worrying about teams getting picked off by the off-projected super conferences?
Well, 2025 is the red line year, because that's when these, the Big 12 schools have signed over their TV rights to the conference, and those contracts come up in 2025. So if you assume they're as ironclad as they say, which I really don't, I don't think most people who have watched college sports really believe in contracts all that much anymore. But even if they're as ironclad as a lot of people have suggested, you can, once you get closer to that mark, you can begin to negotiate your way out of it. So like 2022, if Oklahoma says we're going to the Big Ten, then they can negotiate their way out of those granting of right contracts, and I think that's when you could see the Big 12 begin to dissemble. But right now, I think the Big 12 is safe. This is not something that the Big 12 has to worry about today, but they have to take preemptive action before they get in a situation where they're vulnerable, and the Big 12 traditionally has not been the most proactive conference in college football.
Jake Trotter with us, ESPN staff writer, writes for the Big 12 blog on ESPN.com. We're discussing the inevitability of Big 12 expansion, not just a possibility right now. It's clear that Oklahoma, as you have stated, is the big pusher in all of this with David Boren and him coming out with his comments. One of your ESPN colleagues, Colin Cowherd, said yesterday that Oklahoma and the SEC are mutually interested in each other. So while David Boren is clearly pushing for expansion, is he hedging his bets, talking to other conferences?
No, I don't think that's going on right now. Colin's right. I mean, the SEC has offered Oklahoma twice.
Right.
And Oklahoma turned them down both times. Because, I think Oklahoma understands that, they're not ready to part with Oklahoma State. That would be a political nightmare, trying to separate those two schools through the State House. And then, Oklahoma is so tied to the University of Texas and their rivalry. And that weekend is not just a football weekend. I mean, there's so much academic That's a big academic weekend. It's a big development weekend in terms of fundraising. So I think for Oklahoma to leave Texas and Oklahoma State, which they probably would have to do, I think that would be a big decision for them to make, and they're not ready to do it yet. But Oklahoma has the leverage, because if the Big 12 disbands, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Kansas State, those schools are going to be in some trouble. They may not have a landing spot. Oklahoma's going to have a place to go, so they're going to be fine regardless. And to me, that gives them the leverage to push whatever agenda they feel like the Big 12 needs to look at.
Who does David Boren have to sway in order to get his way and bring about some Big 12 expansion?
Well, I mean, he's got to sway some of the presidents and athletic directors in the league. Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner. But I think the first thing that he needs to do is just get it on the table. It's honestly not something they've discussed here in a couple of years. I mean, it's really been off the radar of these board meetings and these athletic director meetings. They haven't discussed expansion. They've had other things they've had to discuss, like the co-championship rule, having a conference championship in 10 teams. That's been at these schools have discussed so far. But if Boren wants to put expansion on the table, his first step is to force a discussion at some of these official meetings.
Everybody talks about the trigger moment that will launch expansion or, put things into a shift again. What would qualify as a trigger moment to really put the pressure on the Big 12 to make this thing happen and go to 12, if not maybe 14 teams?
I think the thing, if you're a BYU fan, the thing you need to root for is the Big 12 to continually get left out of the playoff. That's a huge concern for the league now, is whether their model is the best fit for the playoff era. And if the playoff stays at four teams, which, I mean, there's been talk about going to 6 and going to 8, but you guys know college football takes forever for anything to change. I mean, we were talking about a playoff in like 1987, and it only finally happened, last year. Assuming that it stays at 4 and the Big 12 continually gets left out, like it did last year, where, it had 2 very deserving teams, then I think that's going to really force the issue. It's going to force the Big 12 to take a serious look at changing its model, and that, of course, includes expansion.
You've got a great idea of what the Big 12 wants in terms of a team in potential expansion categories. You mentioned in your article the likes of Colorado State and Memphis and Houston. While they might not look appealing right now, who knows what happens in 5 years with them pumping some money into facilities and their programs. But let's talk about BYU. Where does BYU fit into this expansion discussion within the Big 12, if at all, in your perspective?
Well, there are a couple things that are working for BYU. One, they have a great football tradition, as you guys know, won the national championship in 1984, have kind of taken it to the Big 12 in recent years on the field. And number two, they have, a huge fan base, that's international. They would bring a lot of TV eyeballs to the table. Number three, they would expand the Big 12 footprint. If you add Houston, you're not really expanding the footprint. But if you bring Utah into the conference, that's another state, that's another city, another market in Salt Lake City. So all of that would work in BYU's favor, I would think. What works against BYU is the Big 12 expanded east last time. They added West Virginia, and I think it would be tricky to come back and then go west. I mean, it's 2,000 miles. I MapQuested it from Morgantown to Provo. That just doesn't seem like a tenable situation in terms of travel. So I think that would be one of the big factors working against BYU. And the other thing, it's sort of it's whispered about, not really talked about, and I don't really have any specific examples. I've just been told that when the Big 12 flirted with BYU last time around, there were some people in the conference that came away with kind of a negative attitude toward BYU, whether BYU they thought was being high maintenance or whether they felt like it just wasn't going to work out because of the cultural differences. I'm not sure what exactly went wrong during those first round of negotiations, but I know that there are some people in the Big 12 that came away with a bad taste in their mouth after 2011 when the Big 12 seriously considered adding BYU at the time.
Was it ever even close in those initial discussions about BYU joining the Big 12?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word close. I mean, BYU was a serious contender. You know, they were talking. So yeah, I would say they were close. It wasn't like, you know, they were a day away from adding them and then decided not to. But yeah, I mean, there were discussions and you know, from leaders in the Big 12 and BYU about how to create a framework that would include BYU in the Big 12.
Jake Trotter with us on BYU Sports Nation. Follow him on the Twitter machine at Jake_Trotter. He writes for the Big 12 blog on ESPN.com. When you talk about the geographic difficulties that may be involved here with BYU joining the Big 12, because others have said that is the number one reason that BYU is not being discussed. Like Sunday play and you guys having your own network, like those are concerns, but the geographic problem there is what's holding it up. We live in a day and age of airplanes, and you know you've talked about Morgantown to Provo. I don't know how often BYU would play them, if it would split into two different divisions if they went to 12 or not. But you know, to Texas, it's only a 2.5-hour flight. So is it really that much of a concern?
I think it's a little bit of a concern because it wouldn't just be BYU. If you expanded west, you'd be adding BYU and say Boise State or Colorado State. And I think that, you know, the people at West Virginia would certainly be against that. And, you know, it's not just a pro BYU or anti BYU argument. You know, there's a pro argument for expanding east. You know, the Big 12 has had some issues, you know, in recruiting in Texas because the SEC's presence is so much more there now with Texas A&M being in the league. You know, the Big 12 would be wise to open up, you know, recruiting pipeline elsewhere. And if you add somebody like, say, Central Florida, which has a huge student body, is kind of an up-and-coming type program. They were in the Fiesta Bowl a couple of years ago. Central Florida would all of a sudden open up Florida as, you know, more of a recruiting possibility for the Oklahomas and Texases of the world. And that's a very attractive thing because Texas and recruiting in Texas anymore has just become so competitive that, you know, it's hard to get in on, you know, some of the blue chip guys, and really that's where everybody in the Big 12, that's where they get their depth, that's where they fill their rosters is with Texas high school talent.
Jake, other than hoping that the Big 12 gets left out of the playoffs again, what do you think? I mean, BYU wants to get in there more than anything. What do you think they need to do to increase their chances?
Yeah, I think you know, facility upgrades. Obviously, BYU has good facilities, but facility upgrades is something that the Big 12 is going to be paying attention to. That's why Colorado State is building a $200 million stadium. That's why Houston's building a new stadium. Memphis is building new facilities. Cincinnati is building a new stadium. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's created somewhat of a small arms race, you know, between these group of 5 teams to try to sell themselves on the Big 12. Winning doesn't hurt. You know, BYU beating Texas, beating Oklahoma, that's not a bad thing as well. But I mean, really, you can't change where your location is. You know, that's not something that's going to change. And I think whatever they can do to forge alliances in the Big 12, however you do that, you know, over phone calls, meeting people, I think the more allies that they can get in the Big 12. The better, you know, because this is going to be a very competitive situation at some point when the Big 12 decides to expand. You know, there's going to be 8 or 9 schools that are going to that desperately want to get into. It's not just BYU. So anything that the BYU can do to generate allies that wouldn't hurt their cause.
Are they creating allies by destroying Texas?
Yeah, I mean. You could say that, well, you know, we don't play these guys. But, yeah, I think ultimately that kind of thing is good for BYU because, you know, the Big 12 wants to improve its strength of schedule. You know, they're not going to add Tulane, even though, okay, Tulane's in New Orleans, you know, academically it's strong. But, I mean, Tulane, football-wise, is not going to bring anything to the table. Your strength of schedule is going to be hurt by adding Tulane. But adding BYU, you know, a program that, you know, historically wins 7, 8, 9 games every year, you know, that's going to raise your strength of schedule profile, which in turn helps you get into the playoff.
We'll end with this, Jake, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. You're on the panel, and the Big 12 is expanding, and they want 2 teams. You have to make your decision today. Who are you voting for? What are the 2 teams you are putting in the Big 12?
I think there are 2 different options here. If you went west, I'd go with some combination of BYU in either Boise State or Colorado State. If I went East, I would go with Central Florida and Cincinnati. I haven't made a determination on which two sides I would go, but I think those are your two options, and I could make arguments and cases for both sides. So I think that's kind of the scenario we're looking at. Does the Big 12 go west with a Colorado State BYU combination, or does it try to help West Virginia's cause and open up a new recruiting pipeline by partnering West Virginia and Cincinnati and then bringing Central Florida into the fold? I think those are going to be discussions that the Big 12 will begin to have here in the next year or so.
Fantastic stuff with ESPN staff writer Jake Trotter. Jake, thanks for the time. Thanks for answering the hard questions. And I'm sure we will be discussing this again and again and again over the coming weeks.
Okay, thanks, guys. Anytime.